This second lecture for History 2111, what I want to do is go through some key terms and concepts that historians use in discussing history. Each profession, of course, has its own distinct vocabulary. If you work on cars, or if you're a professional quarterback or a brain surgeon, you have key terms and concepts that you use in that profession. Historians are the same way. So I'm just going to mention a few of these because they're going to come up over and over throughout the course, and I want you to know what they are, so when you hear them, you'll understand what I'm talking about. First of all, facts or arguments. Which are the more important in history? Most people instinctively would answer facts. But think about it more carefully. If you were, let's say, on trial for murder, your defense attorney would work from the same body of facts that the prosecuting attorney works from. Now, your defense attorney is trying to get you out of jail. The prosecutor is trying to keep you in jail. They're both working from the same body of facts. So you can see what's important here are the arguments that these men make using those facts. Facts are very slippery. They're very pliable. A skilled propagandist can do just about anything with facts. It is arguments that move people and move nations, not facts. So keep that in mind as we go forward. Sex or gender. People use these two terms as if they were interchangeable, and of course they're not. Sex is biology, gender is culture. Sex refers to the plumbing that you're born with. Gender refers to the meaning we apply to that plumbing. Sex is male or female. Gender is masculine or feminine. No doubt you've known a man who acted in a feminine fashion. You probably have seen a woman who's acted in a masculine fashion. So you see that gender roles can be transgressed, and when they are, it's very noticeable. I remember some years ago, my sister-in-law had twins, little boy, little girl. At the baby shower, the presents for the little boy were blue. The presents for the little girl were pink. That's gender. That's not universal. That's not natural. That's something that we create in this particular culture. That's not something that's practiced around the earth. So keep in mind that these two are distinctly different. Sex is biology, gender is the meaning we apply to biology. Racism, you're going to hear race discussed in this class. Let me give you a short, pithy definition of racism that is going to be useful to you probably for the rest of your life. Racism is when you attribute meaning to skin color. By looking at the color of a person's skin, can you tell if they're a good cook? No. Can you tell if they're a good singer? No. You can't tell anything at all about a person's character based on their skin color, their talents, their vices, their virtues. So when you attribute meaning to skin color, you're practicing a very lazy intellectual exercise called racism. These next two I want you to learn together and keep them in mind. Agency on the one hand, and the other, in quotes, on the other hand. Agency, let me define it, is the will and the capacity to act. The other are those people who are not like us, the dominant population. The other could be African American slaves, could be Native Americans, could be Jews in Europe in the middle of the 20th century, could be any class that is designated as being different from the majority. Now, historians are using these terms, or have used them in the past couple of generations. It helps us to tell history from different points of view. I'll give you an example. Traditionally, when we tell the story of slavery in the Western Hemisphere, we've told it from the point of view of the white slave owner. He, after all, is the one that wrote letters and had bills of sale and had last will and testaments, had the plantation, had the physical artifacts, the primary sources from which historians write books. So we tended to tell slavery from his point of view. In the past few generations, we've discovered that the slaves themselves, although dominated by white masters, exercise agency, the will and the capacity to act. Think about the ways that a slave might exercise agency. He could break a tool that's required for this particular job, or hobble an animal that's required for this particular job. He could become literate. He could convert to Christianity. He could run away. If worse came to worse, he could kill his master. That happens very rarely, but that would be agency. What about for those few hours at the end of the workday before the sun comes up again? For those few hours, can the slave be a father or a husband? Again, we've discovered ways in which slaves exercise agency. Now, we can take this to another step. When we talk about the slave trade, you'll notice that it is the African chieftains who control the slave trade. The Europeans have to wait until the African chieftains are ready to make a deal. This again is agency. It's the Africans who are in control here, and we'll go into more depth in this later when we talk about Atlantic slavery. The other, again, those people who are not like us, once you designate a group of people as the other, you can do anything you want with them. And it doesn't matter what makes them different. They could be freckles and red hair, people over 6'5". It really doesn't matter. What matters is that once you designate them as being different, you can legislate against them. You can take their labor. You can take their children. You can take their property. You can take their lives if necessary, or if so desired. So keep these in mind. They'll come up again as we go through the semester. I want to mention two ways of reading. You read both literally and figuratively every day, but you're probably not aware of it. You're so used to doing it, it seems quite natural to you. I want you to be conscious of this. To read something literally is a surface reading, a superficial reading. To read something figuratively is to read for symbolic importance. You can read the same thing literally or figuratively, and you get quite different meanings from it. I'll give you an example. Adam and Eve in Genesis. If you read Adam and Eve literally, you have two flesh and blood people living in the Garden of Eden. I mean, we could send them a package. You could just address it Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden, and it would undoubtedly get there. If, however, you read Adam and Eve figuratively, you get something different. You get people who represent those trials and tribulations that all humans go through. Lust, deceit, happiness, despair, those conditions of being human. Another good example would be, was it Jonah and the well? You remember that God gave Jonah an assignment. Jonah did not want to fulfill this responsibility. He tried to escape on a boat. He went overboard and was swallowed up by a great fish. Now, where did the big fish vomit Jonah up? Well, on a beach at precisely the place that God intended him to begin with. So if you read Jonah literally, you got a guy living in the belly of a big fish and then getting vomited up. If you read Jonah, I hope I didn't just get that backward. If you read Jonah figuratively, then you have something different. You have the idea that you cannot escape God's will. Literally, you got a guy in the belly of a fish. Figuratively, you can't escape God's will. So you see, you get two different readings from the same story. One is a superficial story on the level of a fairy tale. The other is a deeper symbolic story that has transcending meaning for us. A couple of other terms here. Eurocentrism and American exceptionalism. Now, we're going to talk about American exceptionalism in more depth in our next lecture, but I want to mention Eurocentrism here. And you can see what the word means just by looking at it. Eurocentrism, telling history from a European perspective. Now, of course, we all do this. We're all descendants, or most of us are European descendants, and so we tend to tell history from that point of view. But there are other ways of telling history. There's more than one. It's not just the Eurocentric way. Now, let me think of a good example here. Columbus Columbus is an excellent example. We have traditionally told the story of Columbus from a Eurocentric point of view. It's a story of triumph, of great progress, of adventure, founding of a new world, linking Africa, Europe, and North and South America together in a great Atlantic world that's going to emerge. We think of Columbus as being the decisive turning point, launching us toward modern history. We talk about the Columbian Exchange, and we'll talk about that later in this class. So from a Eurocentric point of view, the story of Columbus is one of a glorious triumph. What if we told the story of Columbus from the point of view of the Caribbean Indians in 1492? You'd have quite a different story, wouldn't you? You wouldn't have a story of glorious triumph anymore. You would have literally the end of the world. It would be the apocalypse. Within a couple of generations of Columbus's appearance in the Caribbean, the Taino Indians are dead. So the arrival of Columbus and his sailors with their Eurasian diseases, for which the Indians have no immunity, it represents the end of time, the absolute end of the world. So glorious triumph from a Eurocentric point of view, the apocalypse from the Indians' point of view. There's nothing wrong with Eurocentrism. It's just that you should be aware of it as you read, as you watch films, as you listen to lectures. Be aware of the point of view that you're being confronted with. Paradigm shift. Let me give you a definition. A paradigm shift is a sudden, new, or revolutionary way of understanding some worldly phenomenon. Two examples come to mind immediately. First, 16th century Polish astronomer Copernicus demonstrated that the sun did not revolve around the earth. In fact, it was the reverse, that the earth revolved around the sun. This, of course, is a dramatic shift in how we understand the solar system and the place of the earth in the universe. You can see why this could be a dangerous argument. It decenters the earth. It de-emphasizes the earth's importance. Perhaps the earth is one of many planets, not just the one planet. Perhaps it decenters humanity as well. We're maybe just one of many species instead of a favored species. Another example, more recent in time, 1859, Charles Darwin published on the descent of species his theory of natural selection. This represents a fundamental break in how we understand not only human life, but all life on this planet. So we go from the old model, a creationist model, that's the old paradigm, to a new paradigm or to a new model or way of understanding, and that's the evolutionary paradigm. And the last key term I'm going to mention is epistemology. All of you know what the suffix means, ology, that's Greek, the study of. Epistemene is also Greek. It pertains to knowledge. So epistemology is the study of how we know things. I'll mention four. We know things through science, through faith. We know things through empiricism. Empiricism is the knowing the world through your senses. And we know things through intuition, that gut feeling that you have. You meet somebody and you know immediately that you don't like them. Or you see somebody across the room and you're immediately drawn to them without knowing why. Epistemology is usually a topic we reserve for philosophy class. But I like to use it in history as well because it allows us to think critically about the material we're receiving. So these are key terms and concepts that we will use over the rest of this semester. You'll hear these terms come up again, so I wanted to lay a foundation for you today so you'd be familiar with them. All right, thank you.